How well do you understand influence? Do you know the triggers that nearly all of us tend to react to and respond to in exactly the same way? Do you know how to keep a room full of people energized when you're giving a presentation? Do you know how to use some of the tools of hypnosis to work to your advantage? Is hypnosis even a real thing? Well, we're going to get into it today with my guest, Keith Kong. Keith is a professional mentalist. And if you don't know what a mentalist is, think somebody like Darren Brown, tricks of the mind, playing with psychology and leveraging that in a way to either be kind of mind reading people or influencing people to do things or react or respond in certain ways. If you've ever seen professional magicians and comedians Penn and Teller, they have a TV show called Fool Me. And Keith was a winner of that show with his mentalism. So you know that he's good. And he very kindly came and joined me in the Present Influence studios to talk about some of the psychology of influence and persuasion, how to use that in presentations, and even how to use some of the entertainment skills of being a professional stage mentalist to help you be better on stage as a speaker and communicator. These are all things that you're not going to want to miss in today's episode. It's packed full of lots of really useful tools and tips from Keith. Welcome to Present Influence, the show for professional communicators who want to influence, impact, and inspire with their talks. My name's John Ball, and I'm your guide on this journey to mastery level communication skills. Keith, thank you so much for coming and joining me in the virtual studio. It's great to be with you today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, John.
I wanted to kick things off, since you are a professional mentalist, by making sure that our listener is going to know what a mentalist is and what a mentalist does so that we can fully understand why I was maybe so excited to have you come on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. A mentalist is like a professional mind reader. If you think of a magician as someone that does sleight of hand, think of a mentalist as someone that does sleight of mind. So, for example, it's a branch of magic, but it's a specialty. Think general practitioner compared to a neurosurgeon. And neurosurgeon is a good metaphor here because it's all about the mind, all about the brain. You're never going to see me make things vanish or levitate or that sort of thing. But instead, I'm going to be making predictions and reading minds. And this all happens on a stage, speaking from the platform, typically at corporate, high-end, private events and that sort of thing. It's all entertainment. I don't claim to be a psychic or anything like that, but it's a slightly more sophisticated form of magic.
And so you're never really just going to get on stage and just mumble or murmur to your audience, right? There's got to be a bit of a wow factor with what you do, I should think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I'm at an advantage here because, and I think magicians in general are, because we already start with a miracle. Like the thing that you have to do is already supposed to be impossible and wowing. So now you have that head start. But of course, it doesn't mean that you can just go up there and do that thing. You still need to know how to speak and rehearse and know what you're going to say and how to present. But absolutely, to answer your question, yeah, the wow factor always has to be there.
So just because I'm genuinely curious, when you are planning a show, when you're putting your act together, and I imagine maybe you have more than one act that you performed over time, is that something that is very carefully planned and positioned? Like we have to start with this big opening, close with this specific opening, make sure we hit some beats along the way, all that kind of thing. Just give us a little insight into your planning process for a show.
So for me, the answer is yes. I know performers that say, oh, I just go up there and like they'll show up to the venue and be like, I don't even know what I'm going to do yet. I'm just going to feel it out. And that to me, that terrifies me. I want to have a plan going in. I feel like it better prepares me. And at the very least, I want bookends. I want to know that I'm going to start strong and I'm going to end strong, because shows that start well tend to end well. So it's really important that I hit the opening mark, deliver those lines. And then, yeah, or me in particular, and a lot of us put thought into the structure of the show. How do we add texture? How do we make it so that it's different? For example, when you see a comedian, you'll go and the jokes all interweave. And at the end of the night, if you try to tell someone about the show and you try to tell them a joke, it's difficult sometimes because the jokes have callbacks and they come and go throughout the show. Whereas sometimes you go and see a magic show or a mentalist and there's a trick, there's another trick, there's another trick. And So I put a lot of thought into how I weave it, how I make it a cohesive show and not just magic for the sake of magic.
I guess in my head, I'm picturing like someone like Darren Brown, who I imagine, is probably the only mentalist I've actually been to see in a theater. But those shows are undoubtedly very well planned and probably months in preparation. So just in my head, that's what like it makes sense to me. But it's a lot like speakers. A lot of speakers really want to be very well prepared, have everything planned out, know how they're going to open, how they're going to close, have everything so that you can have things that call back to other things or things that use the right metaphors within that. The kinds of elements that are just very hard to do on the fly, to improvise them into that do require a bit of finessing and planning. So I like that, particularly that you do that.
And
And
just to say,
yeah,
I don't think they should be mutually exclusive. I think that by being prepared and having those talk tracks and knowing where I'm going, it also allows me to live in the moment. And if something organically happens in the room, then I can comment on it. I can break away from that script or talk track, address it, and be in the moment. And then I can get right back on track and know where I left off and get everything back on the rails. So I think that it is important to live in the moment and have those moments with your audience, but being prepared also helps with that.
yeah, that makes total sense to me, because if you are improvising the whole thing and like maybe, your stuff really was, just get up there and do whatever I feel like in the moment. You do have to be giving mental energy to what's coming next. What am I going to go into next? How am I going to lead into that? Whereas a prepared show allows you, as the flexibility, again, very similar, I think, to speaking and to some degree into comedy as well, because even great comedy improvisers have done so many reps of improvisation that they pretty much just know where to go with improv. So they have put in hours or months or even years of preparation to be able to go and do that, even if you don't know exactly where the improv is necessarily going to go.
Yeah. And then the other thing is sometimes you see guys that are so rigid in structure that it just comes across as insincere because they're not living in the moment at all. They're just saying jokes and they're speeding past them as if they're not in the moment. So it's a really fine line. I think it's an important balance.
Yeah. You got into magic pretty early when you were a kid. Did you have those natural performance elements then, or is that something that you've developed over time?
I think I had a little bit of a knack for it, but it was definitely something that developed over time when I started working with consultants. And because I was the guy that would get up there with that natural talent and wing it, and it went great. People liked it and stuff like that. But I'm really glad that I didn't stay in that space and I started putting more thoughts into everything, like why we do everything that we do in the show. If it's not adding to the show, it's taking away. So I want to say everything that needs to be said in as few words as necessary to say them. And also while evoking emotion and getting people to remember it and digest it in an easy way to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know what you do is not the same as what I do as a speaker, and I'm sure you would have no trouble transitioning to doing something like that, though. But what kind of ideas or actually concepts do you have in mind for how to keep an audience engaged throughout the whole of the show?
A few things come to mind instantly. Visuals, stories, and things like that get them thinking. I would say things that are also involving the audience hands-on. So you asked about the structure to my show. I like to, as early as possible in the show, get everybody involved. We call it a macro effect. But if I can get everyone in the audience to stand up or participate in some kind of way, now you're in the show. And that just, it makes it harder to drift off and get lost in a conversation if you're actually the center of the show. And now, if from an early point in the show, you're affected and you experienced something pretty impossible, pretty crazy, now you're more likely to be invested and along for the rest of the ride.
Gotcha. And so I think as there's something to learn from that in terms of having a level of audience interaction and interactivity in what you do. I hear a lot of people now in the speaking world talk about they want more audience interaction. And some people interpret that to be more like having a workshop activity and a keynote speech, which I generally think is a bad idea, but enough interaction that they're doing something as you said, get them to stand up, get them to be involved and be a part of it, raise their hands, shout something out, something that actually has them involved in what's going on, so that they're not just passive observers anymore. And I think that's a really key part in this.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be something long. I do like workshops a lot because I feel like we can get everyone involved easily and we can make things happen that are really transformative. But if you can do something transformative from the platform, even better because it's got that same effect. If I can take you through a transformation, opposed to just showing you from a textbook or this study said that, but if you can actually experience it and say, for example, do something that you thought was impossible a few moments ago, and now in seconds, you're able to do that thing, which is a real example. It's a thing that I have done in different presentations. It's so powerful. Everybody in the room talks about it, and now they leave with this transformative skill that they can put into practice immediately.
Roughly how long would a show of like yours be when someone comes to see you?
It varies. When someone comes to see me, it's difficult because I primarily perform at corporate events where they bring me in. And so
Okay.
it ranges from anywhere from 15 minutes as a human caffeine sort of event energizer in the morning, all the way to a 60-minute after dinner entertainment show. But I think the sweet spot, most clients bring me in for about 45 minutes.
Okay, great. So again, lots of similarities to the professional speaking world with that as well. What for you are some of the key elements or key ways that you then keep people engaged throughout a 45-minute to 60-minute presentation or event?
With me, one thing that's really great is because it's a mind reading show, people's favorite topic tends to be themselves. It's themselves and their own thoughts and what it means and their feelings and things like that. So if I'm reading your mind, you're now the star of the show. And not only that, if I'm telling you that I can tell you what the person sat next to you is thinking, now you're curious about that too. So that's what's great for me is the show's different every time because the audience and their thoughts is what determines the outcomes of things throughout the night. So I have that to my advantage because people are already intrinsically interested and motivated to follow along with that. I would say also things like texture, making sure. It's. I saw a mentalist the other day, and oh man, I just looked up. My girlfriend was sat next to me, and it made me want to cringe. I was like, I hate every part of this. It was just so boring and drawn out, and it's unfortunate. But look, you hear this sometimes in the mentalism community or in the magic community where they say mentalism is so boring, and that's not the case. Bad mentalism is boring. Drawn out
Right.
mentalism is boring, and so I work really hard to keep things moving, keep the pace, add texture. Look at the set lists. For me, it's like this is a mind reading routine, this is a prediction routine, but I'm not going to have a prediction, another prediction. It's too much heavy spice. We need to break it up and create more of a flow to it. And then, of course, no magic for the sake of magic. Is there a meaning behind this? What's the underlying message here? Why are we watching this? Yes, it's for entertainment, but if I could give them something else to chew on and think about and take home with them, then it's even better because now it hits on multiple levels.
I can remember when I very first trained as a coach, certain people around me got very wary that I was going to be analyzing them to coach. It's not the same as psychotherapy, but people thought I was going to be analyzing them. Do you find that people are a little wary of you as a mentalist? Like they try to be careful what they say or do around you?
Oh, 1,000%. I've walked into venues and people that have booked me or been on the board that knows I'm coming and stuff like that. They'll be, oh my God, are you reading me now? Don't look at me. I think it's great. I remember it's interesting because I've had a lot of mentors and psychology professors and things like that. And there were times early on where I looked at some of these guys and I was like, oh man, like he knows what I'm thinking right now. And so it's really cool to have been on both ends of that.
Yeah. And so do you find it is something you can switch off, or do you sometimes find yourself reading when you don't really intend to be?
I do switch it off if I'm not thinking about it, but sometimes you'll catch something And then you'll just know, oh, this is what's happening right now. And now you're paying attention to it and you're back into it. So it's interesting. I think I do turn it off because I don't want to constantly be analyzing. I think that would be exhausting. But it's great that you can flip the switch, turn it back on, and get a grasp on what's happening. And the other thing that I would say to that is also sometimes people get into psychology and they learn a little bit of it, and then they trick themselves into believing that they're an expert or that they have a solid grasp on a situation.
Right.
So it's important to read all of these things, body language, subtle cues, and things like that, all should be read in clusters. You're looking for a bunch of things that are congruent that would lead you to the same conclusion.
Yeah. I'm very fascinated by the psychology aspects of what you do, and the whole area of mentalism interests me. Probably not enough to go and start learning it at this stage in my life, but I do find it very fascinating. And I know that you have some background in psychology. What are some of the maybe most surprising things that you've learned or realized from what you do in relation to how people work, I guess?
That's a great question. There's not a whole lot that surprises me anymore. I always like to say people are people, and like people are people. They're fallible. They fall for the same kinds of influence and persuasion and certain things, reciprocity norms. Like we're all susceptible to these things, even if you know about it. I remember being surprised by, and this is a wild example, but schizophrenics, people with schizophrenia, and they're having delusions and, all of these hallucinations, things like that. Despite that, it really surprised me when I was first learning about all of this years ago to find that people with schizophrenia are aware that they have schizophrenia. Like they
Right.
know that this is a thing, that they're experiencing false beliefs and hallucinations and stuff like that. But then they still sometimes can't differentiate between the two. So like that was an interesting thing to me, that there was one guy that we talked about. He was actually a therapist and he developed schizophrenia. So he was very aware of what he was dealing with, but it still was able to take control when he's not medicating himself, which is a whole nother thing when it comes to schizophrenics and that they take. And we could go on and on about that. But yeah, surprising things. There's not too much anymore. It's just, I think that people are people and we all can do good things, bad things. Yeah.
Do you feel like you have any insights into how people work that perhaps other people don't have generally?
I think so. I think just being aware of I think just being aware of the different things that are out there when it comes to things like reciprocity norms or body language. Like these are things that are happening. Body language happens without you thinking about it. But if you know that it's happening and you can pay attention, now you definitely have more insight into what's going on than the average person that doesn't know anything about it and is watching the same conversation happen.
Yeah. And for what you do, you will have elements where you're going to be doing influence like one on one with people, I would imagine, and also elements where you may be doing it with the whole room. What are some of the things you could tell us about how the influence and persuasion skills work in those sorts of areas? What are some of the maybe insights or even hacks or ways to understand this of influencing one to one and influencing on a group level?
Yeah. Okay. So one on one is going to be probably a lot of the stuff that your listeners have heard. Things like bonding and rapport, matching and mirroring. Those are all great for one on one. Color psychology is interesting. Blue is a persuasive color, red is usually a power color. So those things factor in. And I think that these are all multipliers. When you know these things and you stack them, it's just like bonus points. From the platform, oftentimes people get loud and chatty, and it's hard to grasp their attention, especially right at the start, people in the back of the room. For me, this is why I like to come in with something that involves everybody if I can. I
Yeah.
also want to build the credibility. When I come out, there's a sizzle reel that plays and it shows the shows that I've been on and the credits and accolades that I've received. And now people tend to say to themselves, oh, no matter what this guy does, it's going to be good because it's already been determined that he's good based on other professionals and people like that. people, when they get chatty, oftentimes it's our instinct to get louder and try, like, guys, try to command their attention. But it's actually better to talk a little softer. And now they're like, "Wait, what's happening?" And now they want to pay attention. So a ton of techniques come to mind when it comes to
That's something that also, like, if you speak a bit softer, other people, there's that going, shh, trying to hear them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great because you notice the change in sound. Like, everything's really loud. And how many times have you been talking to someone and then the room gets quiet and it's, what's happening?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I get that. With one-to-one influence and persuasion, you say matching and mirroring some things like, but what are some of the maybe lesser known things that you might use in working on stage with somebody, or in your routine?
There's so many subtle techniques for something as simple as, if I want to determine whether or not someone's right or left-handed, because I don't put a whole lot of stock in NLP, but there are some parts that do work that I do agree with. And one thing that's interesting is eye movements, for example. Up and to the left is typically fabrication. Like, we might say that that person's lying, they're creating a story, whereas up and to the right would be recall. But one thing that's interesting is that it's the opposite for left-handed people. So how do you know if someone's right or left-handed? Sometimes I might just ask in a presentation, but if I want to know subtly, I might hand them the mic and watch for the hand that they grab it with. And now I know. Like, little subtle things like that are great. I think we talk about body language. Your nose and feet tend to point towards areas of desire. We could talk about shoes. Just looking at someone's shoes often tells you a lot about the kind of person that they are, their communication style, and that sort of thing.
Like if they're all scuffed up and scruffy, or if they're polished and pristine, that kind of thing. And what is it you look for there?
Absolutely. Yeah, if they're polished and pristine, look at someone's office even. If you go into someone's office and there's a place for everything, chances are this person is very analytical, data-driven. They want the statistics, they want facts, like everything's neat and organized. Whereas you go into someone's office and they've just got awards and accolades on the walls. Now you know that this person is like a sort of dominant personality. If you're in a buyer situation, these are the people that tend to like to buy in bulk. They want to get things done. Done is better than done right. We can just get it done. We can fix it later if we need to. If you go into someone's office and they've got pictures of their family all over the walls, then you know that this is like a steady relator, the glue that holds society together. This is the person that wants everybody to be happy, everything to be safe and fair. So I might use words like, and if that sounds fair, then we can, or if we all agree, then would the next step, would it make sense to do this as the next step? And so the language might change. Now, going back to that person with the awards on the wall, in that same conversation, I might say something like, and then if that sounds good to you, or I might say something like, you guys know your industry, you probably do it better than anyone else. And that's all music to that person's ears. So you look for subtle cues like that and you can deliver the same message, but worded differently, worded in a way that caters to that person's personality and communication styles.
And that's just from paying attention to some of the detail on the person and around them in their environments as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is pretty awesome. I'm interested that you brought out NLP, neuro-linguistic programming is something that certainly a number of my listeners will know something about, and maybe even have had training in. I've been through training for that, and I'm probably in the same boat as you, as there are some bits of it that kind of good and useful, and there's a lot of it that's kind of crap.
Yeah.
I don't really bother with. What are some of the other aspects or that you maybe have got from that perhaps have been helpful?
I would say anchoring is a good one, right? Anchoring, condiment anchoring, which is just tying a feeling to an object. And now anytime that object comes out, but psychologists might explain that as a form of classical conditioning, right? Like very Pavlovian. If you have these feelings when this object is around, now when this object is around, you have these feelings again. So it all makes sense. Things like that. The eye movements are interesting. But I don't know. I think a lot of the rest of it is just maybe like too bro sciencey in a way.
It certainly made some people a lot of money teaching
Oh
it.
yeah.
There's no doubt about that. But yeah, so I think some of it is cheap psychology. And for me, it uses a lot of peer pressure to get results in those sort of large event things where somebody, I think maybe even certain religious events might do similar things where somebody feels that they have to go along with it. I think I feel the same about hypnosis. So I'm
Yeah.
curious what you think about hypnosis because I'm a bit like, I don't necessarily think it's a real thing, but I think we can convince ourselves to do stuff. But where would you, as a mentalist, where would you stand with something like that?
So I would say hypnosis is a real thing. If you've ever been driving a car and you space out and now you're home all of a sudden and you're pulling in the driveway, you don't remember the last few miles or anything, that's a form of hypnosis. We experience that all the time in our day-to-day lives. It's just when it comes to a stage hypnotist or hypnotherapy, it's almost as if you're in the driver's seat. The hypnotist is in the passenger seat with a roadmap, steering you, telling you where to go, and you allow it to happen. And it's not, I don't want to say it's playing along, but in a way, like you're listening to these commands and you're being receptive to them. And it is relaxing. An hour of hypnosis feels like a night of sleep. I've been hypnotized. I've hypnotized people. It can be fun. I've never done hypnotherapy, but obviously people see results with that as well. And so, yeah, it's real. There's different levels of response to it. Some people are non-responsive because they want to fight it. They think, oh, I'm not weak-minded and stuff. And if you want to fight with a hypnotist, you've already won. It won't happen. You're not going to be able to you wouldn't do anything that you wouldn't normally do under hypnosis if you weren't under hypnosis.
Yeah.
Unless you get into like Manchurian Candidate type stuff, which is a whole nother stage hypnosis and that sort of thing. And then there's some people that have really negative responses. It's called an abreaction, which is when there's some kind of trauma from their past or something like that. And now being in this trance state, something triggers that and brings it up. And they might get really angry or pass out or shake. And yeah, so you look for signs like that. If you bring someone up and you're doing an induction, which is the part that is putting them under, and you're seeing them and their fists are getting clenched as they're sitting there, like things like that, that's usually, it's not always the case, but if you see a stage hypnosis show and they tap you and send you back down to your seat, that might be one of the reasons. We don't want that happening on stage. And it's happened to my friends where they'll be doing a hypnosis show at a school, a college or something like that. And a girl came up on stage, had an abreaction and just started crying on stage. And it's obviously an awkward moment, but now the organizers of that event also have concerns and the hypnotist doesn't come back the next year because of it. But it's a thing that can happen. So I'd say it's definitely real, but yeah, there is an extent of people. There are even some people that will get on stage and just play along. And
Yeah.
the hypnotist isn't asking them to do it, but they're the star of the show. They're up and oftentimes if a hypnotist notices that, he will send that person back to their seat too, because that's not what we want in the show. We want authentic responses and reactions.
So, Arian, I'm not necessarily of the opinion that it's all bunk, that there's something there, but I'm not sure exactly what hypnosis is to that extent. It's like, where do we define the line or draw the line between it just being a form of self-hypnosis where you convince yourself or where someone external to you actually has the ability to have that mental influence over you? Because I think, as you suggested there, you have to give it to them. You have to trust the person. And if you put up resistance to it, it's not going to happen anyway.
Right. And it's like a form of mindfulness in a way. I remember a psychology professor of mine who would have us do mindfulness activities and exercises at the beginning of every session. And I once made this comparison and she didn't like it, but I stand by it. I think she didn't like it because people sometimes fear hypnosis and she didn't want them to fear mindfulness and everything. I don't think you should fear either of them, but there are massive similarities between the induction phase, the first 15 minutes of a stage hypnosis show, and a guided meditation. I want you to concentrate on that spot on the ceiling. Focus on that and breathe in, breathe out, shut your eyes. Think of this. You're descending down a stairwell. Like it's very similar. And so it just puts you in this relaxed state, which is why it feels so good when you come out of hypnosis. Another hypnotic technique that you can apply to various aspects of everyday life is when a hypnotist puts you under and then they bring you up, they bring you out, and then they put you back under. So they'll hypnotize you. They'll give you a post-hypnotic suggestion. The moment I snap my fingers, this is going to happen. That happens, then they go sleep and you're back under. When you go back under, you're in deeper than before. So if I can bring someone, let's say it's a sales situation or something like that, and I'm really selling you on this product and you're ready to buy, and then I say, well, but you're probably, I don't know that it would work actually, or I don't know, you'd be a good fit for this because of that and stuff. And then you're like, yeah, I guess so. And it like deflates you. And then you say, but actually, and now you like bring them back in. Now they want it even more. They're locked in even more. A few other things on hypnosis. Techniques include things like pacing and leading. So pacing might be, John, as you're sitting there with your feet flat on the ground, hands in your lap, you're going to start to imagine that you're stuck to the seat. And the harder you try to stand, the more you stick. And so now I'm pacing by saying, as you sit there, and you are, feet flat on the ground, and they are, hands in your lap, and they are, you're going to start to feel this. And now I'm leading. So I'm saying like, as this is happening, this is also going to happen. And then if you notice the language, I'm saying things like, the harder you try, the more you're going to stick. I'm not saying like, I'm saying try. You're going to try to stand. You're not going to be able to do it because you're going to stick harder. So there's a lot of language and there's a lot of structure in hypnosis as well that helps get that influence.
And I remember from my NLP and hypnosis trainings, that was like embedded commands, right? It's like you're telling them already what to do, but it sounds like you're just pacing their experience.
Yep.
Very interesting. I love the psychology of all of this. I wonder what psychological insights, especially that you might have, that could be of great insight or benefit to people who are on the stage as professional speakers and communicators.
I think a topic that probably comes up a lot is tonality is a big thing when it comes to communication. The platform, speaking from the stage, is, I would say, more difficult than the one-on-one situations because now you've got a massive crowd and you can look at the audience and see what sort of industry they come from and get different ideas based on that of who you're dealing with. But when it's one-on-one, it's much more easy. I would say tonality is a big thing. It's probably come up here a lot, but body language we know is 55% of communication is nonverbal, and tonality accounts for 38%. So it's the second largest one. You could say some really horrible things, but if you say it in the right tone, then it'll fly by. And think of tonality as what dogs understand. So I could yell at my dog and be like, you're the best dog ever. And the dog's gonna like freak out and run away because he doesn't understand the words, but he understands that tone. Whereas I could be like, oh, you're such a bad boy while petting him, and he's gonna be wagging his tail and loving it. And so think of tonality when you speak. When it comes to saying something really important, slow down and deliver those lines. And now it just hits different. Like the pacing of the speech and tone, those are all very big, I think, for influence as well.
And that suggests that you want to have them congruent to what's going on or to the emotion of a particular piece that you're in.
Absolutely. Because anytime there's an inconsistency or incongruency between those three forms of communication, words, tonality, body language, it comes across as disjointed. It's what we see as sarcasm. I could say, wow, John, you're a really smart guy. Or I could say, wow, John, you're really smart. It's the same words, but the tone makes a massive shift because it comes across as sarcasm because they're disjointed.
Yeah. When you're on stage, are you conscious of your own body language or maybe even of your audience body language?
I try to be of my own for sure. We do this thing in rehearsal sometimes where we stand on a sheet of paper. It's 8.5 by 11 inches sheet of paper. And we don't move from that paper unless it's motivated by something, because I myself am a natural pacer. If I'm talking on the phone, I am pacing around the whole house. I'll get my day's worth of steps in that way. But on stage, it is important. It goes back to that thing. If it's not adding, it's taking away. So everything has to be deliberate.
I like that. All your movement on stage should be volitional. And certainly I feel for anyone who's on stage for whatever reason, if you're pacing around or rocking or those kinds of things without purpose, it makes you look unconfident. Like it maybe damages your credibility from that sort of perspective. So I think that's a very valuable thing to pin onto.
Yeah, not just that. Have you ever heard someone say something like, sit down, you're making me nervous? Or you make people anxious by moving or just patting your leg and, those
mirror neurons, I guess.
Yeah, mirror neurons, exactly.
So we pick up on what's going on from stage. And with the audience, do you pay attention to like how they're sitting or how they're physically responding to what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that same thing. If their feet or nose are pointed towards the door, you're in trouble. You can also gauge, like, people have short attention spans sometimes. So I think the reason that I get booked for 45 minutes most often is because I usually tell my clients and prospects, I found this to be the sweet spot where it feels like a complete show. Everybody loves it. It leaves them wanting more, but it's not tired by the end of it. It's not overdone. The novelty hasn't worn off.
Yeah.
So a 60-minute show is usually where I push it to maybe 70 minutes if we're in a theater and it's something theatrical. If you go any more than that, 90 minutes, you mentioned having seen Darren Brown, there's usually an intermission that people would go stir crazy without.
I think so. When you are performing, do you have, I ask because I do this as a speaker, do you have a conscious about, this is how I want to be showing up energetically? This is what I'm aiming to project out to my audience of how I want to be showing up in the performance. And what would that be if you do?
Yeah, it comes down to what do you want them to be saying in the stalls? When the show lets out and they go to the bathroom and they're thinking about the show that they just saw, what do you want them to be thinking? What do you want them to be saying? Wow, that was incredible. That was so mind-blowing. And they're just full of energy. Or do you want them to go away reflecting, thinking about their identity and who they are as a person? And there's no right or wrong answer. It's up to the entertainer or speaker or presenter to make that decision. And so you decide on how you want them to feel and then work backwards to determine what you can do to ask those thought-provoking questions or to just wow them. In magic, we have these things that are called ta-da moments. And you don't actually say ta-da, but that's the gist of it, right? There's this magical thing happens and the audience goes, wow. But sometimes in mentalism, we don't want that big applause moment because, and sometimes we do, but sometimes we don't because that's not a natural response. My genuine amazement my instinct after that isn't to start clapping. That's what we're trained to do. But sometimes I'll do something and it's just silence for a moment because everyone's mouth is just like, as they're looking around. The other day I did a show. It was actually like a really informal thing. And the audience, it was like 100 people. They started chanting witch, which that was a fun one.
Did you want them to be, or were you in a very religious
I was like,
environment?
Thank you. No, they meant well by it. They were just so blown away.
I know you've already had some great successes with your career so far, and you've got some exciting plans ahead. I don't know if you're able to talk about what you've got coming up right now, but what can you share with us?
It's funny that you prefaced it like that because unfortunately there are some, probably one of the biggest things that I'm working on right now, I'm not allowed to say much about, but the things that I am allowed to say are I'm working on a book and it's going to have a lot of the things that we talked about today included and so much more. It's like a psychological Swiss Army knife. So tons of practical situational psychology from the boardroom to the bedroom to the bathroom. It's got everything in there. And I'm really happy with that. We've got a section on memory techniques, a section on the psychology of attraction, psychology of influence and persuasion, sales. It's so very excited about it. And so I've been working on that. I also just have a ton of corporate events coming up. I'm being booked out further in advance than ever before. I've got things booked through mid 2026 right now. And that's not to say there's no openings from now till then. If you're interested, inquire, but it's great. We've got tons of corporate events coming up, national conferences, award shows, those types of things.
Yeah, I will certainly be wanting to check out your book once it's available. And even though it's stuff you can't talk about, I wish you every success with all of that and the stuff that you can talk about as well. For those who maybe do want to come and find out a bit more about you and maybe connect with you so that they can stay tuned for what you've got going on and when your book's out and those kinds of things, what's the best way for people to do that?
So I will give you the link. My website is kongmentalist.com, Kong mentalist.com. If you go to that website, if you do kongmentalist.com/links, LINKS, it will give you everything. So you'll have the links to my Instagram, YouTube, where to sign up for the mailing list. And that way you'll be notified. You'll be the first to know when that book gets launched and everything like that. So kongmentalist.com/links will have everything. And on most social medias, I'm at Kong the Mentalist.
Fantastic. That's going to be in the show notes for anyone who just wants something to click on, but I'm sure you can find it. It was from what Keith has just told you. You shared a lot of great insights, and there's some nice little hacks and stuff for people to pick out today. And it's been a fun conversation. So I just want to really thank you for coming and being my guest on Present Influence.
Yeah, thank you so much. The time's just flown by. This has been really fun.
It has. Thanks so much.
I wonder if you're anything like me and have a few thoughts about some of the things that Keith talked about in that conversation. For me, it was fascinating to hear about how we pretty much all work with the same triggers, but there are sometimes subtle things that we can tune into that might give us an edge. Things like looking at the context of the situation. One element that Keith talked about, particularly in relation to that, was like maybe how someone's dressed, looking at their shoes to give you a sense of how they take care of themselves or how they think about themselves. If you are in one of their environments, like their office or somewhere in their home, looking at the context of the situation. So you're not just looking at the person, you're looking at them in the context of the space, that you can pick up on some cues around them as to how they might like to be talked to or what they might appreciate you focusing in on. Notice the things that they kind of want you to notice, even if it hasn't been super conscious from them. What is it that they've made on display that they want you to notice? It really was interesting to me to have that talk about NLP, and note that I'm pretty much with Keith on that. Some aspects of it are great, some aspects of it not so much. And there's bits I use and bits I tend to dismiss. Even having paid a small fortune to do NLP trainings, and very nearly went into becoming an NLP trainer myself. So kind of glad these days that I didn't. And the whole thing, I don't know, I could be wrong about this, but the whole NLP movement thing does seem to have died off somewhat, thankfully. Although I'm certainly aware that people like Tony Robbins are still doing very well with their events. And some people think they're wonderful, some people less so. I'm not going to get into it here. I'll say this though, I've always been a little on the fence with hypnosis as to how much of a thing is it? Is it really just we're convincing ourselves to do things? Is it more that somebody else can actually guide as we go into particular trance states? There are elements of it that I'm like, yeah, I get it, but it's so hard to define and really pinpoint. I see it being more related to, as perhaps Keith was saying, like meditative states, mindfulness and the likes, where we kind of can slow our conscious thinking down a little bit and maybe influence ourselves more effectively in those states. So whilst I wouldn't necessarily suggest that everyone needs to go out and study mentalism, unless you actually want to be a stage mentalist or mind reader or something like that, then it might not be the thing for you. But there are certainly some tips and tricks we can pick up on, and as professional communicators, we should pay attention to the things that can have great influence with our staging. Now, we will always hear people talking about things like vocal variety, especially if you ever go to a Toastmasters or public speaking club. Is one of the bits of feedback that comes back more often than just about anything else. But to know that it's a tool of influence, and that playing with the speed that you talk with can be that as well, and playing with your volume, so many different vocal elements that can captivate your audience, that can keep them engaged and even enthralled in what you're talking about. These are really good things to play with. And I like this whole principle of it's far easier to play with these things when you have a well-practiced, rehearsed talk that you can go out into the world and deliver. It's going to make it easier to do the finessing, to be a little more improvisational, to be in the moment. But as Keith dutifully reminded us, not to get ourselves stuck into a rut where we're just doing it from memory and maybe even just phoning it in after a time. We have to find the ways to keep our presentations fresh for us as well as for our audiences. So if you have already created a keynote talk, great, but it is not carved in stone. It should be a living thing that you get to update. It's not like when we write a book and you have to publish it and then that's it, boom, it's published. Sure, you can do a revised version later on, but it's not really the same as being able to, maybe the next time you do a presentation, bring in a new bit of supporting evidence or a bit of a development from where you've been at. Things do develop. We learn more over time. We see things a little differently. And sometimes we find out the things that we've been teaching for years, we probably need to stop teaching. And not necessarily that they're wrong, but maybe they've just been superseded by something else. And we should be able to step into those things and not be dogmatic about how we do things, how we perform. It will get stale for us and it will get stale for audiences too. We absolutely must adapt at least small elements of our presentations to the audiences we're in front of, to the cities and countries that we are in when we are delivering them. Let's personalize little aspects of it. And we should always aim, I think, to improve one particular aspect of our talk and presentation. It might be how we say something. It might be changing up a story a little bit. It might be playing with the order of things. Keep it fresh for you and be open to what actually makes more sense. And some of that's going to come from audience feedback and some of it's going to come from what feels right and in flow for you when you're on the stage. Lots of things to consider from this episode, and I hope that you've enjoyed it too. Now, if you are looking to punch up your keynote, or maybe you haven't written your keynote yet and you want a bit of help and guidance around that, get in touch. You can find out more about me at presentinfluence.com or come and connect with me on LinkedIn and shoot me a message there. And we could have a little chat about where you're at as a speaker right now, where you want to get to, and what's available here to get you to where you want to get to. So don't be afraid to reach out and get in touch. I am still looking for a handful of people who would like to be coached on the show. So that's a free coaching session for you. 30, maybe 40 minutes. We'll see how we go. But the catch, or the cost, if you like, is that coaching call is going to be broadcast. It's going to be published in the podcast. So other people will be able to watch on YouTube or listen on podcast channels and to your coaching session. So we all get to learn and benefit from it. What we speak is a private coaching session, but it's not going to stay private. That is the agreement that we make. If you are interested in being coached on Present Influence, whether it's developing your keynote or even getting started as a speaker, if you checked out the first coaching episode with Julia Packwood, you will know that was a great coaching episode. Julia's just getting started with her speaking career. And I think we've made some really great progress in that one session. You might be a little further along with your speaking journey than Julia. Either way, get in touch if you are open to being coached on the show and maybe even helping others through your coaching session. Maybe you just want to listen to the show and that's fine. I absolutely appreciate you for doing that and for tuning in today. Now, I hope you are already subscribed to the show. If not, it only takes a moment to do that. You can click the plus button on Spotify or follow on Apple Podcasts, or maybe it's something different on your podcast provider. Or if you are watching on YouTube and you've got this far into the video and you haven't already pressed like and subscribe, please do. And maybe even leave a comment as well. What has been the biggest takeaway for you from this episode? I'm going to be back on Friday breaking down a story that I delivered just a week ago last Sunday at a storytelling contest here in Valencia, Spain. It won me top raconteur of the night. I got voted the top storyteller for the evening. It is a bit of a personal story, but I hope you'll enjoy it. It's certainly got some laughs in there and some ooh moments in there as well. And I'm going to break down how that story ended up getting put together. I will probably try and get the organizer for these events onto the show as well, because I think what he's doing around helping people get on stage, doing storytelling and running the workshops that he's doing is something that's worth sharing with you too. All right, so I hope you'll join me for that. At this moment, I haven't completely decided which of the next of my queued up guest interviews I'm going to bring you. There is a reason for that. I might share it with you next week. However, I will be back on Wednesday and Friday next week with more Present Influence. And so wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, have an amazing rest of your day. See you next time.